that song until Brother Tommy said something about it last night, I believe. And he kept asking me, sing that Rose song, sing that Rose song. So I tried. That's all I did was try. Glad to be in the house of the Lord, like I said. Let's turn to Acts chapter 2, very familiar passage. I know we us ministers and like to use this a lot, but I'm praying this past week trying to figure out what the Lord would have me to say to y'all, and I had something else, but he started dealing with me on this, so just pray for me, keep me in your prayers. Acts chapter 2, verse 1, and it said, "And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Ghost, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance." You know, like I said, I know this is a very familiar passage, and I've had do my praying, my Bible study and stuff. Here lately, I've been praying for revival, Brother Tommy. How much this world needs another revival. And this little title that I have, a reviving for revival. You know, I looked up the definition for revive, and it gave me a few different definitions in the Webster's Dictionary. One, it says to restore to consciousness or life. It also said to restore from a depressed, inactive, or unused state, or bring back. The third definition is said to renew in the mind or a memory. And that third definition, and then the last one on number 2 is kind of like what I'd like to talk about for a few minutes. It says bring back or to renew in the mind or memory. I believe in these last days that we need a revival for our spiritual souls. We need to bring back, as the second definition states, you know, we hear a lot of things going on in the world, all in the Middle East, and even here now today. You know, Brother Tommy, we were talking, I believe it was just yesterday, about all these mass shootings that's going around, just right here in the United States. You know, and some of the things that's going on, and we talked about that for a little bit. And to me, I've always wondered what causes them to do that, you know. And it's not, they don't have that renewing of the mind. They don't have what they need they're not in their right mind, so to speak. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having these shootings. Now, I don't know about you, but to me in Acts chapter 2, later on in that chapter, verse 41, it says, "There were added unto them about 3,000 souls." To me, that sounds like it was the first revival, Brother Tommy. And just doing my studying. And I also looked up the definition for revival. And it stated, it gave me a few different definitions as well in the Webster's. The first one, it said renewed attention to or interest in something. But the last one that I had, it said a period of renewing religious interest. And in this present day and age, I was shocked when I saw that, when it said a period of renewed religious interest, because they're trying to take God and religion out of a lot of things. I believe that the latter portion of chapter 2, like I said, was the first revival. And you know what we need, not even as a church whole, but also in our own spiritual lives, is a renewing of revival. You know, I've been praying. We actually, our home church down there, we're actually working on a new sanctuary because the one that we have now, we're outgrowing. We're maxing it out on Sundays and Sunday nights. And that's a good thing. You know, it's good to see more people come into the house of God, get saved, and come in, and it's showing that we're wanting revival, Brother Tommy, Brother Nathan. You know, church, we need that revival, no doubt. You know, Matthew 5 and 13 through 16, it talks about we as a light. You know, let's turn over there real quick. I'm nervous as all get out. Matthew 5 and 13, it says, "Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men." Verse 14, it says, "Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid." Verse 15, it said, "Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house." Verse 16 also said, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." You know, we are that light. That light that's set up on a hill, that city that's set up on a hill that cannot be hid. You know, I was just this past week I had a dentist appointment. And I just went in, wasn't thinking nothing. I just went in, I was getting my routine cleaning done, and the lady struck up a conversation. She's like, "Man, you're tall. How tall are you?" She's like, "My boy's 6'2", and I know you're probably a little bit taller than him." So I started talking to her, and then church came up. And you know, when she opened the door, I couldn't help myself. So I started talking to her about church. I said, "Yeah, I go to church." She asked what denomination we were, what church I went to. I told her where I went. She's like, "Really? You're that church that's getting work done, the parking lot and stuff?" I was like, "Yes, ma'am, that's the church. That's my church right down in that valley." I said, "That's my church right there." And she said, "You know, I've been looking for a church. I've been looking for a church. Do you guys sing those old hymnals still, right?" I was like, "Yes, ma'am, we sure do. We got the books right there in our pews." And you know, that right there sparked that revival again in my heart and in my soul. You know, so many times we go throughout our day-to-day lives and we forget about so many people that's hurting because we got so many things on our mind going through, trying to get work, us men going to work, you ladies, whatever y'all do, pottery, groceries, watch the babies, whatever. You know, my mom's into that pottery stuff. But even y'all can be a light. I had there at my work, I transferred into upholstery, building the seats for the school buses. You'll see some of ours going down the road. But I transferred into the upholstery, building the seats, and this was a little over a year ago. And you know, me just starting out as a young minister and stuff, I just try to keep my nose down and just do what I need to do because, I mean, we're there to work. And there was an elder gentleman there, and he asked me, he said, he looked at me, he's like, "There's something about you." I said, "Okay." He said, "You're a Christian, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." I didn't say a word to him. I was there probably maybe a week. He was showing me the ropes, so I could get used to things. And he could see that there was something different. He said, you're a Christian. I said, yes, sir. And again, he asked what denomination and stuff. And I told him, I said, well, I'm Holiness. I'm Pentecostal Holiness. He's like, okay, you're one of those. He's like, can you explain to me about the women's long hair? Just flat out right there in the middle of production, he asked me about women's long hair. I was like, okay, you asked. I'll talk to you. I mean, we need to get to that point to where we're not scared to talk about the gospel. We need to show them that there is something different, because they're out there, they're lost and they're dying, and they're wanting something different. And so I talked to him. I explained to him the best I could, because as a young minister just starting out, and I talked to him, and ever since then he'll come up to me and he'll ask questions about the Bible and our religion and stuff, and just that alone. Women, I mean, you're a light. They can see that there's something different in y'all, and when we get full of the Holy Ghost, it shows them that there is something different, and when we can spark that revival in our own spiritual lives, they can see that there's something different, and they're gonna want it. You know, I've heard Dad talk about Jack Coe. I believe he was down in this area somewhere, and you know, he didn't know what church was. He was drunk. He stumbled into a tent revival, as what I can remember, and he got saved. And he started going around. People were like, "Man, you're just drunk. Just go back." But people started noticing that difference, Brother Tommy. There's something different about him. There's something different about him. And I forget the exact story, but something to the effect of he started saying, "Hot dog, I got it. Hot dog, I got it." And then people started noticing that difference, because he had that change, that renewing of the mind, that reviving of his soul, of man, I got something different. And so they started seeing that difference. They're like, I want what Jack's got. You know, they didn't know what it was, but they knew it was different because he used to be drunk. He used to be a drunkard. And they kept saying, I want what Jack's got. I want what Jack's got. Imagine what we can do, church, in just Tatum here alone. You know, sparking that revival, getting that reviving of revival. Imagine what we could do here in Tatum, Longview, and Henderson, and some of these other towns around here. Imagine the revival that we can get. I preached this message once before, and it just came back and so strong. But imagine what we can do. Imagine, Brother Tommy, all these pews completely full, chairs lined up everywhere, up and down these walls and the walkways, and people standing out in the parking lot, wanting to hear the gospel because they're hungry, because they see that revival, that reviving in our souls. I pray that we can have that revival where they will put prayer back in the schools, and that's something that has really kind of stuck with me a lot. You know, like I said earlier, they're trying to get rid of religion and the Bible and things out of the schools. I remember hearing something back that they were trying to get "In God We Trust" off of some of our money. I mean, stuff like that. I mean, that was one of the foundations of the United States, Brother Tommy, as if my memory serves me correctly in my history, you know. And just something about it, I know I'm not perfect. That summer I was down here 10 years ago. Me and Nathan, we talked a lot about our past and stuff, and I know I wasn't perfect, but you know what really woke me up was I fell asleep behind the wheel. I was just going to church. I was just playing church, basically going to church, showing up because Mom and Dad told me to go. I didn't have a choice. Went stayed the night at a buddy's house. My baby brother, some of y'all don't know, Brandon Ducky. He was with me. We stayed up all night the night before. We went to church Sunday morning. I was dozing off behind the wheel going to church. Dozed off for probably a minute after church on the way to lunch. Went and dropped my buddy off. I was heading back to the house. And I might have told this here. Dropped my buddy off. For some reason, I hated seatbelts, and I still do. You could ask my wife. I hate seatbelts in cars. I think that's one of the most stupidest inventions ever. But for some reason, that morning, after I dropped my buddy off, I put it on. Went down the back roads, got on Highway 66, went down to the light there in Sepulpa, Oklahoma, turned left and got on Highway 33. Brother Ben, you might even know where I'm talking about, maybe just a little bit. Got on Highway 33, and the Creek Turnpike kind of goes right over Highway 33. Went under the Creek Turnpike. I fell asleep. I fell asleep behind that wheel, and I drove past John Christner Trucking. I don't know, I probably drove a good mile and a half. Drove past John Christner Trucking, dead asleep. Baby brother dead asleep right beside me. And drove past that trucking company, climbed a hill, went back past the Baptist church, went down that hill, veered off. I woke up to the sound of tall grass hitting the front of that F-150. And I opened my eyes. I said, "Oh, Jesus." Grabbed that steering wheel, hit a concrete culvert, and I blacked out. That truck went end over end. I literally took that truck. I was probably doing good 60, 65. Hit that concrete culvert. Took that truck completely airborne, rolled it over 2 driveways. It rolled sideways. Pointed, when it was all said and done, it was pointed as if I was heading back into town. Cab crushed in. Suspension missing. The tailgate was closed, but it was actually completely off. The bolts broke that held down there at the bottom. The bolts broke, and that tailgate was sitting up against that bumper on that truck. Crawled out. People's like, "Don't move, just sit down." After it was all said and done, we got the truck towed. Dad was actually in West Virginia preaching. Got that truck towed out over to the house. That support beam under that motor cracked right in half. That moment is what really woke me up, Brother Tommy. And I don't know why I'm telling this, but that woke me up to where I finally realized that I need to get my act together. I need to get my own spiritual revival, so to speak, in my life. Not knowing what was going to happen, didn't know. But you know what? From that day forward, I started praying. I tried the best of my ability to start reading my Bible more. Trying to get that revival in my own spiritual life. And, that was the turning point for me. It scared me to death knowing that I could have died. That the officer on the scene said, "You're lucky to be alive, because if you would not have had that seatbelt on, you probably would have went straight through that windshield." If you want to come to the piano, I'm almost finished. But he said, "You were lucky to be alive." And just, it woke me up. We had after we were married, we had a Mustang. It was a 2004. And I was driving down the road. I was having some chest issues and stuff. And totaled that out. I zoned out, totaled the front end out. And once again, the officer on the scene said, "You're lucky to be alive." And he said, with the size that you are, he said, "I'm surprised. You're lucky to be alive because you're still in this car." He said, "If you were any smaller, you would have been ejected out of that front windshield in that Mustang." But church, I don't know why I told those, but we need to get that reviving for revival in our souls, in our everyday lives. You know, Brother Nathan in Sunday school said, that flesh, we got to die daily. We got to die daily. We do, because if not, we won't be able to have that reviving for revival in our everyday lives, our souls. You know, I'm almost finished. But imagine the 3 Hebrew boys when they were tossed into the fiery furnace there. Christ showed up in the midst there. You know, I kind of often wonder what they were doing. I mean, the Bible stated that they didn't smell like it. They didn't smell like burnt flesh or whatever. The rope or whatever they had that was tied around their hands was no longer there. I wonder sometimes they might have had a revival there, right there in the middle of the furnace, knowing that God was right there with them. You know, Paul and Silas, when they were in that jail cell there, they started singing and praising there in the jail cell. Their backs were probably beaten, tore to pieces, bound and chained. They started having revival right there, even though they were probably sore. They were doing what was right, Brother Tommy. They preaching the gospel. They started having revival, and you guys know the story. The guard came up to him. "What must I do to be saved?" I'm putting in kind of my own words there. "What must I do to be saved?" And he took him, got him cleaned up. And if I remember correctly, his whole household got saved that night. You know, revival. Revival, Brother Tommy. You know, you could have revival anywhere, I believe. You could have revival in Walmart. You could have revival at a gas station. We could have revival right here in church. Or we could go down to Brother Jimmy's house. You know, anywhere that you're willing to shine that light of revival, they can see that difference. Anywhere you go, you can have revival. And I just prayed this morning that we could get a hunger once again for revival, a reviving of revival, the renewing in the mind or a memory to bring back revival once again. You know, like I said, that's something we need, and we're fixing to have revival with Brother Noah Hatfield later on this month. Now that we're in September, and he's a good preacher. Don't get me wrong. But we could have revival without a special preacher. Right now, we could have a revival right now in these altars, in those pews, wherever you want to pray. You know, we could have a revival. Let us, church, to start that spark, that get a reviving for revival in our souls today.